Okay, so let's open up, start with the slides right now. I'm going to talk about surveys. There is surveys and then there is polls. We know what the differences are. Surveys is what we look at for figuring out what type of different questions that you can put together while you are strategizing and planning for your research questions. The surveys are important because they obviously are the primary source of information. So there are two types of questions that we'd like to ask. One is what we call close-ended questions, and the other ones are open-ended. Open-ended is more on topics that require a sort of information that is not restricted, or there is no sort of fixed answer for it. And occasionally these are the kind of questions that are more personalized for your sample group. So we just leave it as an empty space and ask the respondents to describe or write something about it. And then, of course, when we are doing coding and memoing, that is where we are going to pick up all those information sets based on open-ended questions generally. Close-ended questions are really different types of formats. We're not talking about what to ask in a certain situation. It's more to do with the style of writing the questions, or what could be considered standard titles for the question sets that we put. So if you look at it over here, you'd find that we've got something called dichotomous questions. Dichotomous is, well, we'll just describe it as we look at the examples. That will be the best approach. So these are, some of the ways in which, or this is how they are named. Let's just view them and see how they are set. But in the survey types, there are generally considered two types of surveys. One is longitudinal and the other one is cross-sectional. I believe longitudinal, I'm going to refer to the book also, just so that I want to make sure I'm not incorrect. But the longitudinal questions generally are the ones that pertain to or is described earlier before or at the planning stage. It is fixated on a problem or an issue that you know of.
Those are survey types, right? Survey types, not question types. Yeah.
No, these are survey types right here.
Right, exactly.
Right. And the cross-sectionals are the ones that has to do with asking questions at different stages of your survey, because the events, they are evolving, they are still in the process, or there could be instances where certain part of information is available while the next part is to follow. So you have a little bit of flexibility in changing your surveys. Occasionally in cross-sectional surveys, you do make adjustments because it is just one of the ways in which you are going to perform, especially in ethnographics or the kind of scenarios where you are more of an observant, and you do make changes to the questions based on the outcome of previous questions. So those are cross-sectional, but I want to just check it a little bit on the way it is mentioned in the book. So let's just see what, okay, actually it's the opposite. The cross-sectional collects information from respondents at a single period in time, uses the cross-sectional type of surveys. Cross-sectional surveys usually utilize questionnaires to ask about particular topic at one point in time. versus longitudinal when the researcher attempts to gather information over time or from one point to another. He is doing a longitudinal survey. So that's the only difference.
Mhm.
It just depends on situation, really. I mean, sometimes it's a mix of both. So let's look at the close-ended questions. Close-ended questions are more definitive. They have certain criteria or certain parameter sets, which allows for the respondent to actually check the variables or select one of the variables out of the mix that is presented. So the mix in the case of dichotomous survey questions, it is shown like this. As you could see that it has two, dicho is 2, so it is either yes or no, good or bad, whatever. You have only 2 choices. Multiple choice, as we all know, and which we'll find out in the exam, is set of options right shown right here. Rating questions: how often do you purchase lunch in the company's cafeteria? Very frequently, occasionally. Would you think that this data set is more of a quantitative data, or is it going to be a collection of qualitative information? How would you treat this one? In terms of, because here the numbers that you're looking at, it's just representing what is mentioned as, I wouldn't think of it as quantifiable in the sense of how the qualitative data is collected, because you can see that it is frequency. They're talking about occasionally, seldom, rarely, never. Wouldn't these be qualitative data collection?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So rating questions is close-ended. Likert scale, it's got options, which is on a sliding scale or on a scale which would allow for someone to answer based on the best sentiments that they can come up with. So disagree, somewhat agree, agree. So when you say somewhat agree, would this be quantifiable in any way? Is there a method to it?
Yeah.
How would you place somewhat agree? And how would it impact your conclusion on based on something that is answered this way?
And it's on a scale, in this case, on 1 to 3. So you would count up all the ones that are number 2, etc., and quantify it that way.
Now, somewhat agree is very controversial, and it's very hard to be able to give it a weightage of any sort or convert it into numerics. But if it needs to be answered, there has to be some sort of justification or some sort of criteria that allows for this type of information to be converted into something that is given an attribute which would fit into your, especially the softwares that you use in data visualizations or dispersion charts and all of those. This is where you'll have to come up with some sort of quantifiable number. And if it is not a number, then there has to be some kind of method applied that allows a qualitative data conversion. Like there is something called dispersion method or dispersion in the graphic chart, which is the number of dots that are concentrated within X and Y axis somewhere there. And where there is more of dots that are, occurring close to each other, or they're showing a higher concentration. That's where you can come up with some conclusion based on the visuals rather than quantifying it. So it is to be agreed method. It has to be something that needs to be planned on how you eventually are going to make it more meaningful. Here is another example of Likert scale. Overall, do you think trade globalization is good for? So it says disagree, somewhat, or agree. See, here they have given a number. So it is more to do with how you, and then this is actually crossing with the questions. It is consumers like you, companies in your country, creating jobs in your country. So as far as answering these questions, this might be evaluated based on Likert scale. So this is another way of how you're going to present a Likert scale. This is for you to use as a reference when you're preparing your surveys. There could be more innovations involved, but this is more like when you're giving handwritten surveys, or even if it is digitized, it is not considered something that is linked to the analytics directly. It is more to do with collecting it and then converting it and using something manually as a way of defining the table and the variable within the tables, so that it is ready for input into any software or any analytic method you're using. Semantic differential indicate your attitude towards the introduction of a state-run lottery. Now here we are running variables with the scale that is giving a range. Now this range is 1 through 7. It could have been 8, it could have been 9, and it could have been 10. So there is a rationale for everything that you put in your questionnaire. Why would it be 7? Or if it is 7, then the rationale could be that whenever you have a middle number, I'm just giving you a little bit of what I use it for. So if semantic differential means that if there is a neutral value, I want to make sure that the entire range is odd numbers, so that there is a balance of 3 numbers on the left and 3 numbers on the right, and the middle one makes it the 4th one, so that it sort of appears in the middle without creating any confusion in first 3 or the last 3.
Wouldn't it be like a 5-point scale with just 2 more numbers added?
A what, sorry?
Isn't that more like a 5-point scale too? It's just 3 numbers on either side of the middle as opposed to 2 numbers on either side of the middle?
No, it's just a general way of how we are. It's not a methodology of any sort. It's not a rule, because sliding scale means it could be any numbers within the range, except that if you think of it as someone who's looking for a neutral point, and it makes it easier for the surveyor and even for the respondents to just say, okay, I want to be in the middle, but on the good side, it's not going to go, or it is not going to be skewing on the bad side. Now, if these numbers are from here to here, it could be somewhat on the bad side. It's an assumption.
That's what I was saying. I was just saying a 5-point scale would give you the same, would be treated the same as 7 points.
Okay. All right. So this is the rationale, I guess. Then we've got a ranking. If your company requires you to transfer to one of the following cities, what would be your order of preference? Denver, Miami, Chicago, Boston, Richmond. So ranking question is not giving a quality. It is not assessing a situation in the sense of how you would be able to run it on a scale of any sort. Rather, it is definitive or quantifiable in this. So it could be a mixed method where, if you select Denver, for instance, it's your personal preference. It is not your sentiments, but rather more of a definitive preference. So if I give Denver number 1, Miami number 2, Chicago number 3, it would just be indicating the city. Okay, it's not a preferential scale. So ranking questions generally are not considered in the sense when you look at the word ranking. Ranking usually means something that is defined based on the sequence or what has precedence over another. Rather, it's more like when you want to collect personalized information about someone's preference based on whatever factors are there. So it is an individual's definitive preference. So that's, but it's named as ranking questions. Okay. Checklist type of questions. Which of the following would you like to see in cafeteria? So in checklist type of, whenever checklist questions are set, they have more than one variable, or you give the opportunity for the user, and this is one exception though. Rest of them are giving you an option or giving respondents option to select one. But in the checklist, you have multiple options to offer. So if it is multiple options, then use the checklist type of questions. Fill in the blanks here is more like, you are asking, it's not the same as close-ended question. I'm sorry, not the same as open-ended questions, because you do have some sort of an answer that needs to be filled in a blank. And that answer, usually you go a little bit further in fill in the blanks and give some more options to select from, because you don't know what they're going to write here. Right? If you want to give it like 1 to 10 or 1 to 3 or 1 or 2, you can still add and fill in the blanks. But this is not the same as open-ended. Open-ended questions are more descriptive, more sentiment related, preference information types that you want to collect, and then work on it later to come up with the coding or use the coding method for it. So those are open-ended questions. Advantages and disadvantages of questionnaires. It's logical, like, so it's just 3 lines. I won't worry about it. So what are interviews? So this is another method which is not exactly surveys, but it is something to do with collecting interactive information between you and the object. It could be a business or it could be a human subject. But interviews, if you are taking interviews of board of directors or someone that is representative of the company, then it is an interview behalf of the company or the business. So that makes it slightly different. Then with the interviews, it is more personal. It is something that you can ask questions that could be of non-embarrassing questions generally, but the kind of questions that would allow you to build more questions on top of the answers from the respondents. Critical difference is that the discussion involves social interaction between the researcher and the participant, because they are either conducted in person or over the phone. When you are doing interviews over the phone, I wouldn't think of it as something that is comparable when we're doing virtual interviews, like on Zoom, or if it is a focus group that you're dealing with, even that involves a bit of an interview. But focus groups, generally, the difference between focus groups and interviews is that in an interview, it is 1-to-many or 1-to-1, but in focus group is usually 2-to-many, because you always need a moderator in between. So there is, someone that is going to be sitting next to you would act more like a moderator. And if you are doing focus group, then, the observation has to be recorded somewhat. The attitude, the cross-section or the sample that you have for the people that are sitting in, or the participants there, will have many different perspectives. So depending, someone is more focused on certain type of questions, and you may be looking at evolving questions, where in the interview, in the focus group especially, people end up asking questions between each other. It is more of an interaction that the observer would be able to tell, because it's not really between the person who is asking the question. Eventually somebody else takes over, and there is one alpha there who takes more initiatives and sort of runs the environment, and you let it go. You sort of give it that space. So it gets complicated, but it is kind of a behavioral science that when you are doing surveys, it goes a little bit away from the standard questions. You really need to plan for it, as if you are not the only one. You have to have one person sitting next to you. Generally, this is where you are able to correct even yourself as an interviewer, or as someone who's running the focus group. I've done few focus groups before, and my first-hand experience is that you have to be really experienced to conduct that. So even if it's interviews or even if it is focus groups, you need a specialized training to do it. Online interviews, online research conducted using computer mediated communication such as instant message, email, or video chats. Online interviews require different ethics considerations, sampling and repo than practice one. So yeah, so online interviews has more of an approach that needs to be planned very carefully. But eventually you figure out that there is a legal aspect of what information is collected. A lot of times people turn back and say, what I said, you need to delete certain things, or I don't want you to add few things in it. So sometimes it's a video editing you have to do. Occasionally, mostly you do make a blanket agreement that covers everything for you. So after the interview, it doesn't give a lot of leverage for the interviewed or participants to make amendments. Using the tool collecting social cues, the interviewer has a small budget looking for access to people on set standardization. Okay. Cross-sectional, collecting information from the respondents, so we've considered that. Preparing for the sum. Okay. So whenever you're preparing for the survey, the most important thing is your sample. How you've collected your sample has to be not only organized, but it has to have a rationale for someone to express why you chose certain sampling methods. That we have dealt with already. So when we are talking about perception, behavior, observations, all of these terms will have a lot to do with the psychology of how you are going to understand the cues. The perceptions will depend on how you're going to write your observations. The best method is memoing in case you want to write some additional notes alongside the surveys. Behavior, how do you wish? So all of this, these are pretty much itemized in the book. So you don't have to go one after the other. I would like to now look at online virtual focus groups. So we've got a virtual ethnography is when you are actually experiencing something within the culture, or if it is a social sciences related assignment you have, or the research you're doing is going to take time, and it's going to it's going to involve an experience or physically being there. You're pretty much doing an ethnographic sort of you are building your observations through ethnography. Interested in studying culture often engage in the field work to immerse themselves in culture they are studying. Clinical trials, none of you are in any of this. So clinical trials involves a lot of paperwork as far as, first of all, collecting a sample is a huge problem. I wouldn't do a recruitment for clinical trials. It goes through an approval stages, and it takes about the minimum it takes about is few months, at least 2 months, to get approval for the sample that you have. People who have similar prognosis, have similarities as far as what you are interviewing for, and so on and so forth. So this clinical trials is only considered online because it's easier to reach the subject. But the paperwork is a lot. The type of informed consent that you're going to obtain in the type of information that is considered privileged or private, that involves a lot more than just the standard informed consent. So, but this is just to let you know what clinical trial means. So it is by definition any research study that prospectively assigns human participation on groups of humans to one or more health-related interventions. Web-based experiments, these are more social experiments. We see it online, especially in YouTube. You can find there's a lot of different type of experiments. Is really in the sense that you are going to you're not going to build a conclusion like is in typical test or experiments. Experiments usually mean that you're going to make something out of the outcome of that experiment. But in the case of social experiments, you don't reach the conclusion, you leave the conclusion for the reader. That's the only difference I can think of when it comes to social experiments. It's pretty much left for the user of that observation to make notes or decisions. I'm going to now look at ethics. Let's get to the ethics and cover that as well, because we need to finish it in the first half. In the second half, we're going to do Q&As or talk about the exam. So here is the recruitment. Start with the slide so I don't forget or miss anything. So ethics of the internet. What could be considered the ethics or ethical considerations for information procurement using internet as the primary medium? We have used this slide to just give an overview of what it means. Instead of just giving a definition, there could be 2 or 3 different definitions as far as ethics, because it is a very controversial and a very subjective kind of topics. Depends on individuals' morality, how the society perceives certain issues, and it has got a deep root in your beliefs, understandings. So it is pretty much individualized, but generally what is considered ethical is set of rules that improve the lifestyle or improves the what can I tell you? I mean, it is everything to do with how you were brought up, or what were the values given to you as something that you have to have a consideration for in whatever you do in life, or however you look at certain issues will depend on so it is more personal in the sense that it is individuals that would make that decision. Collectively, it is governed by certain laws or legal norms of how the society should behave, are set. So in the case of internet, for instance, I mean, since we have open borders, the line of perceiving or considering what is ethical or not will depend on the part of the world that you are in, especially the social values, certain issues which are more personal, religion, religious beliefs. Everything else would be considered as if it is a one huge community of internet users that generally have to behave at least at the minimum threshold level of morality that is considered uniform across the globe. So generally, that is what is in consideration when it comes to internet. But let's look at some of the issues, like some questions that you can pose that while you're answering it, and I'll tell you some of the answers I get from some of the people that are, living in Middle East, South Asia, Eastern Europe. They may have slightly different answers, but generally, let's look at these questions to figure out. So for us, how important is participants' privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity? So in a country like China, where there is a lot of involvement of the government, the privacy is dictated. Privacy is what is being told or taught. Here, privacy is an assumed right of any human being in North America, particularly. So how important is participants' privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity? It is on a very higher scale in US. So the privacy laws make sure that they are not jeopardizing someone's rights as individuals with the type of information that otherwise is considered common or generally available, like the criminal records. Previously, the sex offense or molestation charges or anyone having those kind of criminal backgrounds were kept private, but in recent years, it's about 20 years or so ago, it has become a public information. So so there's those privacy laws are evolving as well. It depends on the society and how they are going to make changes. So privacy itself is actually considered more on the ethical side of things rather than governed by what the governments dictate. So it is inherent rights which one would like to exercise as a individual in a free country, in a more democratic country. Confidentiality and confidentiality is obviously debatable depending on the situation. So it has got a lot more flexibility, where you are dealing with the confidentiality between yourself and the professional that you're dealing with. If it is an attorney, then the confidentiality is an obligation rather than a right. Then anonymity and all of that. So how important is that with reference to the ethics of whether or not it is ethical for someone to hide their identity when they're sending emails out, for example? Wouldn't there be some sort of protocol to understand or for the legal system to act where someone is spamming versus someone is communicating? How about Googling clients? If you were to obtain information about an individual through social media accounts, make some preconceived judgments on someone by finding information on Google, to what extent Google is being ethical in collecting that information and making it available for the public, versus whether the publicly declared information by individuals gives rights to Google to bring it for viewing. Is that ethical or not? People have different answers for this. So for someone to just come up with see here, the term is ethical issues. What are the issues in ethics that are debatable? So in that sense, we'll have to treat these questions as something that is left open-ended, or something that is defined within the law or within the legal system, or it has certain limitations or restrictions. Now, what is really coming into play as more of a of an issue rather than for anyone to control or for anyone to dictate as part of the legal system or legal system that cannot cover enough grounds, is to define how the artificial intelligence is going to impact the ethics of using the internet. Because internet is a communication means, or it is a communication system. Artificial intelligence is something that uses that communication system. So there is one differentiation there. So AI, in the sense of how the AI systems are implemented, or where they are set, or to what extent they're considered private or not, is questioned. Second aspect of AI is that humans cannot control it because it's activated or it's run autonomously as a mechanical process. So it makes its own decision. So to what extent would you allow AI to make decisions on behalf of humans? So these are some of the issues. Typically, if it is a CCTV, for instance, and it is actually set, or if the cameras are in the public domain, which means on the streets, on the crossings, somewhere that you don't know whether or not they're there, but they do exist. So to that extent, we have to know what is considered private space and what is considered public space. The cameras that are used within a car that you're driving, that you own. So whatever is happening inside of your car is considered private. It is your private space as long as you're in the vehicle. The moment you are using that camera to collect in public, or if your dash cam is collecting information from outside of your vehicle, would that be considered private? If you are taking a video of someone sitting in a car, in your car, and videotaping someone outside, would that be your private space? Would that collection of information be considered as ethical or not? Or from the legal perspective, is it something that gives you the right to take videos and use it? So all those, although not exactly AI, but with reference to the private and public space and your rights in your private space, has a lot to do with ethics. Certain spaces you cannot put a camera, right? In hotels you cannot do that inside of the rooms, but you can do it in the lobbies. Can't put it in the washroom, and so on. So those are, some of the ways in which ethics plus legal system, how the legal system supports the ethical values. The ethical values are pretty much defined within the privacy laws, so that what is considered private here in North America is dictated or is supported by law on the moral values or in the by the society. So the laws are built as supporting, or as something that supports the ethics of using that information or procuring that information. How about spreading news and shares with social media or Twitter? Do you have the right to, without having a consent of anybody's video that you have received or you have made, would you, without asking permission, be able to publish it? Can it become private? Would it be just private within your group that you can use it, or you can circulate it outside of your private space in the social media? So those are the questions. How about writing reviews, opinions, blogs? When people are, getting paid for something, or they get some benefit out of giving out reviews, opinions, or anything that they put as something which is more inclined towards motivation of some personal gain, it won't be as unbiased. Rather, it would have an ethics involved on what you think is moral and what would you consider as morally not or ethically not accepted by the society. So you grow up with certain rules when you are actually being brought up, or your your values that are in what is it called, the right word for it, how as you grow up, the society itself, the norms of what is accepted moral or immoral, that are actually taught by the society or through parenting, proper parenting. So you grow up with those ethics and those values. It's very hard to be not be part of the society, or not growing up in one society, and then you are actually now finding yourself in another part of the world, and you are fighting for your rights when the right don't exist. Or maybe that society has norms slightly different from what is in your mind. So ethics becomes questionable. But when we are talking about the ethical issues in the internet world, especially in North America, we'll be focused on the legality of, or the legal rights of individuals as human subjects to be able to exercise their privacy, anonymity, and anything that is used in any form as a piece of information about or for someone. How about forming a bias or influencing public opinion? Lobby groups, rightist, leftist, conservative views versus, so it just depends. So let's suppose, generally, if you're living in Southern California, in California, generally speaking, California is considered less conservative. They're more open to certain ethical issues which otherwise are debatable or not considered ethically kosher or ethically acceptable. Talking about Iowa, multiple marriages, talking about marriages, same-sex marriages, and so on. So there could be a lot of difference between the conservative mindset and more on the, they call it, it's not called democratic, but they are more open to
Liberal, progressive,
what
liberal or progressive?
yeah, more liberal, I guess. Liberal, true. Yeah, they've got more liberal opinions. So then this becomes again controversial. But to what extent the law is going to support the ethics of using internet for information collection will depend on where you are or the society in which you are growing up. The influencers or the outside influence would support is what the law will support. Okay, so there is state laws versus federal laws versus, I don't know, county laws. You have a lot of laws there in states. In Canada, we only have provincial and we have federal law. Usually, anything that is promulgated into a law within a province is not through the voting system, or not through the number of signatures on certain issues. In states, I know that even the counties or what is it, at state level, there are polls that allow for certain laws to be passed. That takes a lot of input information from the society generally, right? But in Canada, we have a slightly different system. So generally, it is all that the law will support based on what the public sentiments are. What are the ethical limitations of freedom of speech and net neutrality? So these are the questions that one has to ask when it comes to internet ethics. At its simplest, it says ethics is a system of moral principles and how people make decisions and lead their lives. Ethics is concerned with what is good for individuals and society as a whole. So as far as definition, there are several different definitions. Like student of sociology would be reading somewhat a different definition of ethics versus someone who is a student of science. Then the experiments or human subjects, or I'm sorry, the animal rights and everything else becomes part of the ethical definition of what is considered ethics in sciences and so on. So again, the definition itself, I'm just saying that it is not definitive, but it is generally considered more on the neutral side. Benefits on studying ethics: it avoids conflict or resolves conflicts, build respect among common grounds of understanding, displays one's professionalism by acting responsibility. We are more concerned with display one's professionalism, okay, because we are already into the ethics of how the internet is governed by the common sense morality, or the common sense socially acceptable ethical values. We are talking about professionalism as researchers. If we are professionals collecting information, then collection of information, how we collect it, who we collect it from, both aspects of it are governed by what is considered ethically collected information, and having consent from the subject who you're collecting information from. On both sides, it requires a professionalism. Adopts a more professional behavior in an online platform, okay, and gain confidence. So benefits is just that gain confidence. Of course, if I've got a legal cover, totally, I've got enough confidence to do whatever I want, okay, within that. The ethical dilemmas, we just talked about it generally in conversation, how to live a good life, our rights and responsibilities, the language of right and wrong, moral decision. Anyway, as far as we are concerned, we are more interested in internet research ethics. So let's look at what it says. It says analysis of ethical issues and application of research ethics principles as they pertain to research conducted on the internet. Research is collection of information primarily, and the subject from whom or the source from where you collect the information has ties to ethics of how it is collected and how it is used. Key guiding principles. Okay, so these, this is all important conceptual excerpts. So from the book, the previous version 4.0, we collected some excerpts just to give a general concept. Basically, we are just collecting general concepts. What we are discussing right now are the understanding of what ethics means generally in this way that you would apply it when you're doing online research. So these excerpts that I'm going to just ask you to read will just give you a general idea of what we are talking about. In between lines, if I find something I need to discuss, I will discuss it with you. So in this second paragraph, my understanding is that, when we are doing self-correction, we are looking at, because you see, when you are looking at data or information, you're not looking for any bindings that would hold you back from using that information. So if it is legally collected, if it is understood to be a kind of information that you can, that is readily available, you're not going out there reaching for it. So there is no ethical issues involved here. But what it is saying is that if it is data sets that are already available or something that you readily can access and use, you don't have to worry about if it is ethical or not. If you are given a data that has to do with the medical records of individuals, how would you look at it as a researcher? Would you say, no, I don't want this because it is private information? How come it is made available to us or to you for using it? You wouldn't, for you it's information, for you it is something that you can readily use, right? So that kind of a situation. Now, there could be sensitivities also as far as your ethical concerns are to be addressed. Studies involving, yeah, go ahead.
No. Not saying you
No,
need.
I mean, this is just, something that's taken out from it. It's not complete, but at least it is giving us an idea of what could be few things that we should consider. Say with a study involving observation of behavior in a chat room aimed at teenage anorexics. So if you were doing observation of it's a virtual group, virtual interview or focus group, and this is the class of people who are sitting together in a virtual chat room talking about teenage anorexics, what could be the ethical concerns in your mind if you as an observer is involved directly or conducting research based on the interaction in the chat room? What could be the sensitivities here? What would your moderator or you as someone would ensure that as far as your morals and ethics, if one of the subjects is anorexic teenager, and there is a sensitivity of how the people are behaving, or if they are asking questions that would would not, in your opinion, be considered as or there's so much of a sensitivity that it becomes very personal for an anorexic person. You don't want that to be discussed openly in order to protect the sentiments of whoever is dealing with anorexia. It becomes difficult to provide one size fits all ethical guidelines or best practice applying in one stage. Therefore, it is necessary to take case by case approach to it. For example, one may use one's judgment, or if in doubt, consult others who have done similar work to decide on what is moral and what is not in researching in the internet. So again, it's just giving you an idea. There's some of the complications. That's all that you have to gain from this reading this. Division in ethics of internet research, a difference between internet and now this is the two statements which together gives you an idea of what could be some of the ways in which the ethical issues are dealt with based on these two statements. A difference between the internet as a research tool and as a venue. So if it is a research tool, what does it refer to? Or how would it be different, or what would be the difference between a venue and a research tool? So research tools are databases, catalogs, already available information versus interactive collection of data like in forums, groups, web portals, blogs, etc., where the forum can have a label of the type of people that that deliver their opinion. So you have to be very selective. In the forum, there has to be a moderator. In the groups, you have to identify with what group. So I guess ethics will depend on how the research tool versus the venue plays a part. In the venue, you have a higher responsibility, or the the sensitivities are high because it is in real time, or you could say that certain groups or certain blogs, or the writer is famous for having a bias over something. So you have to be selective. Again, ethics will play a role on how would you perceive as something that is normal, abnormal, out of the society's blessings as an issue that otherwise would be controversial, whether internet research is engaged or non-intrusive. So direct interaction is engaged, non-intrusive is just collection of information, anything that is already there, which does not involve your input for whether or not something is ethically inclined or not. So these are the divisions of internet research, where with these two statements, and this is simplified. This is, reading between the lines. This is why the slides are more concise and they have certain points that we discuss. Generally, there is more behind it which supports these statements or gives more details about it. If we understand it generally of what it entails and where the ethics are to be considered. These two statements will do the job. Key ethical issues in internet: understanding human subject. Obviously, understanding human subject is something that is subjective, depends on the type of sample, type of research. But in human subjects, we are talking about informed consent, something that is written on a piece of paper. So in your opinion, if I may ask, Andrew, would you consider privacy or privacy laws to be a privilege in the society you're living in, or it is your right as an individual,
Yeah.
as a human being?
In this society, I would interpret them to be considered more of a right than a privilege, because it's expressed in the law, in laws and so forth, that presumably are grounded in constitutional basis.
So truly, if you look at the root of how the rights are considered to be a right, or something that you own as an individual, as a human being, it is coming from the privilege of just being in a society that has the values that are considered to be inherently of value for any human being to function. So it starts with the privilege. It's an assumed privilege, and then it gets into the legal system and becomes a right. And it keeps evolving, it keeps changing with the technology, with these surroundings, environments that keeps changing.
That's for sure. Right.
So it is a controversial subject. So it is very hard, one of the most difficult subjects to teach, not just for me, because it's just a small part of it, but
right,
in the subject of humanity and in social sciences, it becomes very difficult to explain.
Undoubtedly.
So in the scenario where we are talking about informed consent for collecting information from a human subject, we have to disclose certain things for research purposes, whatever we collect. Purpose of the research has to be part of the piece of paper or the consent that you're going to get from the human subject. So that has to be clearly mentioned, like where they were going to use the research. Second is the methods you're applying for collecting that information. That has to be expressed in detail, so that whoever is going to be the user of that research would understand where it's how you've collected it, type of information, that is possible outcome of the research, that has to be disclosed in informed consent. Associated risks or harms that the participants might face will also be a part which you'll have to explain and express.
Yep.
So these are the four things which are considered as a piece of information that has to be exchanged between yourself and the subject and whoever is going to be the user of that research. And this is given the legal blanket. So these are the four things that we have to be mindful of. I'm going to be just grabbing some of the important excerpts rather than go through the entire thing. It's for you to read later. Some practical challenges: difficult to obtain consent from research participants. Example is forums or discussions. It's just, everybody has their own mindset, opinions. Obtaining consent can affect the quality of the data. So if the method is not properly defined and it is not considered a standard practice for collecting a type of information, that might be a challenge. So you have to be very sure of it, because let's suppose if it is to do with observations, observations at a personal level becomes kind of, it has that bias, element of bias, because you're making a judgment. You are, extracting something out of those interviews, as an example, part of the observation, social experiments. You may have more strong sentiments about certain issues. You may have a bias on a certain, the type of outcomes that is being considered as the as the uh, as the set of information that, for instance, um, um, ethical issues. If you are coming from an ethnic background that is not Caucasian, white, maybe, the color might matter. You may be carrying some personalized or personal judgment that you would apply, or you would have very strong sentiments. So that is more personalized. So that would be affecting. So if it is an observation, maybe it's a better idea that your observation is vetted by at least one or two people of different ethnic backgrounds, if it has something to do with the ethnicity. Difficult to figure out the extent to which the participants have read and understood the project for the information shared, as the researcher does not have direct contact with them. So if it is a survey that you have handed out, the method itself inherently won't have enough information that would satisfy the participants' questions, before even answering the questions in the survey. Difficulty to obtain consent from minors as a researcher. So some of the vulnerable groups that you deal with in collecting information, human subjects, like elderly population. Minors is a separate subject, but let's suppose elderly population, or population that involves collecting information about health, and they have some psychological issues, that makes it even more difficult. The type of population that has strong beliefs, like groups, right, what do you call it, the extreme rightist groups, for example, would have different mindset. And they are considered vulnerable, not from the point of view, from their point of view as subjects, but from your perspective as a researcher, to understand that there would be certain limitations and certain responsibilities on your behalf to know that the population that is subjected to these questionnaires are able to make rational decisions, or able to answer questions in a more rational way. You don't want to obtain information that is personal, where the elderly population don't understand their rights and privileges, or they might be inclined to give you certain pieces of information in addition to what is being asked, even if it is a legal question. So the onus is on the researcher to ensure that they are, depending on the subject they're dealing with, that there are not the kind of vulnerable population which can be taken advantage of. So all these 4 points about making them understand the risks or harms, the method you're applying, the purpose of the research, all this is understood. So these are some of the practical challenges that I can talk about. What is this? Consent in a web page. So obtaining consent, these are some of the methods, like emailing participants, just making them click on something. Like click wrap agreements will not do when you are doing when you're dealing with human participants. So it has to be really expressed in a more easy language that the users understand. Consent cards or tokens. So these are some of the ways that electronic information can be tied up to the individuals, or especially in the case of anonymous interviews. there has to be a trail of some sort. So that is done through consent cards or tokens that may not just show the name of someone or the age of someone, but it has a code which is understood by someone other than you as a researcher. If that source has to be connected with the answer that's given, use of electronic signatures and so on. Okay, so that's not a problem. Just trying to cover anything that I think is important. Ensuring privacy and confidentiality of the internet. So this is what you would do in order for you to collect the information that the data collection under controlled or anonymous environments. So the privacy laws, as far as anonymous environment is concerned, slightly different. Cleaning of data to remove personally identifiable information. If you do collect something that you don't want to include in your research, even though it is put by accident or by design, doesn't matter. If it is part of your questionnaire, but it is identified as extra piece of information or any information that could pose privacy infringement, then you need to identify that or remove that. Use of access restrictions and related data security methods. Of course, understand the privacy levels of various internet sources. So sometimes we don't directly use that survey or that information, and it's coming from third party who do it for you, because a lot of times, like even with us, we engage other companies to do the survey part, which is like more of a physical effort, whereas we can design the survey questions but leave it for third party to obtain the answers or to conduct that physically. So in that situation, we have to look at the privacy levels we give to them for the information that's collected. Certain questions we don't want them to get the answers from directly. What are the access restrictions? Does the site have conditions, rules? So it's talking about some of the ways in which you're going to design online surveys, like some of the built-in securities that you should have if you are running a platform that collects surveys online. So this is what it's talking about. Are there norms or expectations for the use of the site? What are the rights and responsibilities? Now, this is covering both, not just the surveys, but polls as well. So what are the rights, and where it says, are there norms or expectations for use of the site? Okay, so if it is a collection of polls that is presented by sites like Pew Research, for instance, and there are others that actually publish those interviews or collect polls and put it in the graphs and all that. So if you're going to have to use that or their site, what that site would allow for that information to be used for. What are the rights and responsibility of using the site? What are the aims? So anyway, so this is not something that I would worry about. Basically, it is for those who actually own a website that does online surveys. So this is for them to integrate into their software and systems. Ethical recruitment. Ethical recruitment, all it means is that when you are, it is not like human resource recruitment, it's recruiting your sample. So when you're doing that, you have to get an informed consent from those that are participating in your sample. So nothing to be considered important unless, we're just itemizing everything. Points to consider when recruiting participants: respect for privacy, vulnerable subjects. I told you what vulnerable subjects are. The population that I mentioned, elderlies, those that are mentally not as competent as others, or there are the kind of sample that requires more vetting and more interviews before you qualify them to answer those questions. Medical records, patients, registries, clinical data, private medical information. Now, if you are doing a survey as a researcher, would you have access Or would you have the rights to collect somebody's medical information by conducting online surveys? Do you need a specialized permission of some sort? Well, it's not a question about permission if you are doing surveys as a profession, or you actually are engaged through a certain client that is a pharmaceutical company, let's say, and they would give you the assignment to conduct the surveys on their behalf. Then you have to assume that that company or your client is actually in compliance with the regulations that are under the HIPAA, which is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And there could be others as well. So for you to be in compliance with, first of all, as someone who is a subcontractor, it is your duty to ensure that whoever is assigning you the task to those service is in compliance with all the legal ordinance and the regulatory ordinance that is promulgated by specialized bodies like HIPAA, for instance. Conflicting roles when you're recruiting. Individuals may prefer to be contacted about participation in a research study by someone with whom they have established relationships. So you have to make sure that the sample that you have actually the sample or the participants of that sample are not directly related to you, or not getting any privileges, or you're not paying them in a way that they would participate just not as volunteers, but as someone that has motives or have connection with you directly or indirectly, as participants who participated previously but on some other subject or something that does not have a relationship with the type of research that you're doing. So that relationship has to be figured out. Conflicting roles of the individuals, researchers, with others that with whom they have relationships, but that relationship may work on negative side. So it may just be beneficial for the researcher, but it may not give you quality of sample because it is pretty much considered as orchestrated. So I guess this is what therapeutic misconception in the context of medical care and physician. There is the possibility of a therapeutic misconception. I don't know exactly how to put it, but for some people, I don't know if you have gone through this situation. There are certain people who are actually very enthusiastic about participating in surveys. They are the ones who volunteer always. They want to just come in and there are people who just talk about medicines. They talk about herbal medicines. They have strong beliefs in certain type of certain type of medical sciences. So you don't want to go to them every single time. You know that for them it is more like and a lot of times you're pressed in recruitment, especially you don't find the right sample and you just want to reach out to the same people from the previous group, and especially the one who is more enthusiastic in participating, so that at least you get one person recruited or that person becomes part of your research. So you have to be aware of that in recruitment. Like you don't want over enthusiastic people to become part of the sample. So that's about pretty much what we needed to cover on ethics. In fact, we finished it right here when we were talking about key ethical issues in the internet, which we have discussed earlier in the first few slides. So understanding human subjects, private is what is considered private and privileged versus public as far as ethics, informed consent, privacy, anonymity, recruitment. Copyrights, ebooks, contracts, disclaimers. Here, what it is saying is that everything that is put in a contractual way or something that is inherently defined in the law as privileges of someone who has produced a copyrighted work or someone who has written a book, you want to make sure that there is no plagiarism. The work is ethically covered under the law of IP infringement. So you have to be mindful of that. So that is all about ethics. The case we did about photocopying had an ethical element to it. I mean, if the student was concerned about the ethics of how he would use that information or collect or whether or not to use the copied material, was a moral and ethical decision that the student should have made to not use that, even if the professor has asked him to use the photocopied material. So that's all that we are going to discuss on the ethics. If there is a question that you may want to ask, we can entertain that right now. Marge, Andrew, anything that I can answer on these discussions we just finished up? In the exam, it's not going to be a lot of questions coming from this area. There might be, say, about, there is, I believe, 23 questions in the final exams that covers both internet law and ethics. So with the internet law, that covers like maybe 90%, 10% or 3 or 4 questions, 3 questions at the tops will come from ethics. And it's not going to be complicated. It's just going to be about general concepts. So having said that, we're still left with jurisdiction. I would rather discuss the, okay, here it is. Establishing a jurisdiction in the internet is a problem, usually when it comes to cross borders. However, we need to learn about jurisdictions or different types of jurisdictions that exist in the internet. But you know, because there is no specific law that only talks about the internet jurisdiction, because it is subjective and it depends on the law of the land. Generally, we'd like to look at it from how it is applied in the sense of its origin of what it means by certain type of jurisdictions, or how they are defined legally, and then we can sort of visualize how it would work when it comes to some infringements or any of the offenses that are related to the internet. So let's look at personal jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction, it's all definitions, literally. Personal jurisdiction is for the legal system to have a jurisdiction over a person for the offense that the person has committed, as well as for the plaintiff to file for any claims as an individual. So if you have to sue someone personally, the personal jurisdiction will depend on the residencies, will depend on where the businesses are registered, or where the act or offense has occurred, or where the loss or anything that is claimed for by the individual in that county or in that state or wherever. So that is personal jurisdiction of the court. That means they can call or, you know, entertain that case, or, you know, allow for someone to file the claim in their court, because the subject that has been sued would be individually prosecutable in that jurisdiction. That's personal jurisdiction. General jurisdiction will depend on the legal system that sort of has all the different, see, in the court system, there are different levels of courts. We don't want to get into that right now, but let's suppose that the levels of the courts also has a jurisdiction over the type of offense. So if it is to do with traffic violations, if it has to do with family law, if it is a civil lawsuit or something like that, then all of those that generally are covering all the different specialized courts are collectively under one jurisdiction that is called a general jurisdiction. General jurisdiction encompasses civil lawsuit, criminal, family, probate, etc. Specific limited jurisdiction is sometimes temporarily given into the court. It just depends on the court system, the burden of the court, the nature of the offense, and so on. So specific limited general jurisdiction has to do with the state, court system to hear a case whose issue arise from minimum contact. Now, this minimum contact is the issue when specific or limited jurisdiction means that it is not actually in the sense of how all the different types of offenses are covered within that court system. That could be county, or could be state, or could be federal. But it has the ability to rapidly form a special court to cover certain type of offenses. It just is a temporary arrangement. So a specific limited jurisdiction pertains to that. And it is also given as on emergency basis in the case judges are vacated for some reason, they're in between jurisdictions of moving, or anything that is considered as a temporary or quick arrangement because of the necessity. Then you've got subject matter jurisdiction. Subject matter jurisdiction has to do with bankruptcy or specialized courts. Small claim courts are also subject matter. But it is not the same as the general jurisdiction. General is everything. Subject matter is specialized, like bankruptcy courts can be different, may also not be in the same building, but will be part of the same court system. So it is a subject matter jurisdiction. Then you've got territorial jurisdiction. It depends if you, like in US, you have territories like Puerto Rico. I think that is a US territory. Some other territories that are not subject to the general laws, or some of the federal laws don't apply to them, but still they are part of the territory of United States, and therefore those are called territorial jurisdictions. So the laws over there, like Bahamas, for instance, the legal system is slightly different. It is a tax haven considered for a lot of people because the corporate laws are different over there. And some of the corporate some of the federal offenses, which includes the intellectual property infringements, are applied uniformly in these territories, but the laws that are more geared towards states, or the jurisdiction is such that it allows them to make changes in their local laws, they sort of fall under the territorial jurisdiction. Corporate law, for instance, that fall also under the jurisdiction of a territorial law, which can be different from the statewide laws in that respect, for anything that has to do with matters of corporate interest, like you can have tax exemptions, you can, even though that is covered under the federal law, but certain leverages are given to those that are outside of the main territory of United States, and they're called they're outside territories. But when we're talking about territories, don't take it literally. In the legal sense, territories are separated between what the US, all the 52 states are like, versus some of the territories that are actually regulated, owned by the United States, but they are given more of a free hand, even in case of certain federal laws. Okay, so they are more flexible. So those are territorial jurisdictions. A lot of times you find people intentionally put their servers or in territories outside of the main US land with the intent, so that if anything is prosecuted, or someone is looking for filing a legal case, they would have to travel all the way over there, and that sort of gives more of a advantage to whoever the defendant might be. So as a plaintiff, it becomes more difficult if it is a territorial jurisdiction outside of the mainland of United States.
Okay.
Court's authority to determine jurisdiction. Sometimes what happen is that someone may have committed an offense and the plaintiff is planning to sue that person, except that the court might turn around and say that we don't have personal jurisdiction over the individual, or we don't have we don't have a general jurisdiction to have that type of case to be filed in our court system. So makes it very difficult for the plaintiff to file for it. So there is an exception to how the court can actually send a summon to someone who is outside of that jurisdiction on the basis of the minimum contact test. They call it what is it called? Minimum contact, but there is another word for it. It is a state's long arm statute. It is covered under state's long arm statute, the minimum contact. So what it says is that if someone who is subjected to or is being sued would have to have certain attributes attached to the type of offense, the place of offense, and the relationship that defendant might have with the plaintiff. So one is that the residence of that individual. If he has more than one residence and one of the residents is in that jurisdiction which is being contested, the minimum contact test would entail like what is the frequency of travel of this person to this jurisdiction. Has that person been in the residence of that county or that state in past 1 year or 3 years or 4 years? So there is a minimum contact. Is there a business office of some sort that is actually being operated mainly from somewhere else but has a branch office there, or owns any property over there in that state, rents something in that state? If it is a traffic offense, for example, and the incident happened which turned out that it was a criminal negligence, something of high value, or a case that should be filed ideally in that jurisdiction, then that person would have to forego the personal jurisdiction contest, and the court would send a summon for that person to be present within that county court, or submit something, or be prosecuted in that under special circumstances. So that will create a personal jurisdiction based on the minimum contact. Another could be, relationship between a girlfriend or a wife or children, or anything that makes that person visit that area or that location frequently, which is covered under the jurisdiction of, or which allows for the court to summon someone based on the minimum contact test. And so it goes on. So there are 10, 12 different tests that would actually allow for someone to be prosecuted in jurisdiction which generally does not actually is considered personal jurisdiction of the court, but these are the exceptions based on the minimum contact test. Personal jurisdiction on commercial website versus passive, active, and interactive. So we need to know what are these 4 different types of websites. Commercial websites, e-commerce, obviously. Passive websites, static websites that has content only, is not interactive, don't download anything. It's just there for presenting set of information. So that is passive. Passive website means less onus on the person who is the owner of the website versus more of the onus of responsibility if it is a commercial website. Active website is where one has to have a certain element of use that allows for the individual to either register their emails. Even if you register a single email or put your name there, that's considered active because it has an active script in it, or it has a certain database attached to that software. So that is active website. In terms of what would be the responsibility, liability of the person who owns this kind of website will be higher than the passive website. Interactive website is when you are downloading something, you are given the forum to interact with, or chat is involved, something that is more interactive website, yet it may not have to be a commercial website, but the level of responsibility is similar to the level of responsibility in commercial websites. So as far as jurisdiction is concerned, if it is an offense that has to do with commercial website, the location of the server is of prime importance. In the case of interactive website where the business is registered, irrespective of where the server is set, is got a value and is considered to be the jurisdiction. So between passive and active, you can get away with, but between commercial and interactive, jurisdiction has to be established. We've done this part. Any questions, Andrew?
No, my question was going to be about what you just explained. I was wondering
Yes, go ahead.
how the jurisdiction applied to those different types of sites, what that was. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, because you see, it's a very, I mean, if we go into the details of commercial website versus interactive website, you will realize that first of all, the court is going to make a distinction between these four kinds. Okay, first. So if it is a commercial website, it means it's an e-commerce website, purely. If it is interactive website, it does not have to be e-commerce, but it could be e-commerce and interactive both at the same time.
Right.
The only difference is that if it is a commercial website, then we are talking about, so many different, I guess, attributes, which or the interaction that, you have interaction with the gateway, you have the products that can be contested. It could be returns, so many things. But when they're just talking about interactive, you could say that it was a membership website or a free membership or something. But you want to go ahead and sue someone. So where are you going to look for the jurisdiction? You are actually going to look for where the business is registered, versus e-commerce where the server is doing all the interaction or is responsible for exchange of information as a single point. Yet it is considered to be an entity, or it behaves as a human being. Like my mom, whenever there used to be a problem in the server, old days when, I was using internet, I would say the server is down, So my mom used to say, who is this server? I mean, where does he live? Why is he creating this? So it is not a being, it's just it's a so that's when there is a slight difference in how the law is going to look at it. That's why it's the server where it's sitting is questionable.
I could
anyway, it's a very tricky subject when it comes to internet law as far as jurisdiction. And the sad thing is that even till today, there is no definitive law that gives a judgment, or you don't have case laws that would actually refer to any clause in the law that says that this is where the jurisdiction restriction is, or this is where it's going to be, prosecuted. So it becomes, it's one of those things where the court system has not embraced any or promulgated any clauses, that is definitive. Besides, the judges are getting old. They're like they're, so they're not very enthusiastic about these changes.
Right. Very true. Well, hopefully there are new judges coming up. So
well, it's
understand all of this.
It's a natural process. It's a process of elimination. But what else is going to replace it? It's just, I was just finishing up giving allocating the practice exams to all of you, and then we started the class.
Mhm.
So as soon as I finish up, I'm just going to send this over to you. See, what it will do is allow for participants of the group to attempt to make unlimited attempts to these exams.
Okay.
So as an example, if we have a practice module 3, practice exam version 5, what you will get is a login password, which you could use as a group participant. It will all be the same passwords. You will get
Okay.
email, like nobody is going to be able to see anyone's results.
Mhm.
So you don't have to worry about that, even though the password is going to be the same. At the same time, you will get the results coming to you in your email with the questions showing what was correct and incorrect. So you can make those corrections. For instance, over here, it has 30 questions. It is a test preview. So the questions and the pattern in which they are set will all be shown exactly as it would appear in the final exam. So you would see somewhat exactly the same type of screen, when you do your practice attempts, you will see that the screen, everything, it is simulated as if it is the real exam. Okay. You would have to, I would have preferred if you had done your practice with the 10 question test that I gave you. That was just kind of a, giving you an idea of how the practice or the final exams would work. But anyway, this one is not difficult to attempt, except that you would find that there are more questions in these practice exams than
Good.
you would that would appear in the finals. The reason being that in the final exams, it pulls the questions that are randomly selected from the question bank. So if the question bank has like 50 questions and only 20 are supposed to be coming to you, it will be randomly picked, or
Okay.
it will be just picked as 20 questions for you to attempt, and rest of them will just be sitting there. Unless you don't pass it, you go to the next exam, again there will be a randomization, and you would find out of the pool of 50. So what I've done is that I've actually given you all the 50 exams of all the 50 questions, instead
Good.
of
Thank you.
making it randomized, so that you have access to all of them, and that increases the chance of you to get familiar with all different type of questions within that module or the question bank of that module. So you won't miss out on anything. So that, don't let that overwhelm you. It's just that you can attempt them as many times as you want. You can also mark the ones that are incorrect and see what the correct ones are. There could be two ways of how you would look at it. One is, if I really have to pass the exam, I wouldn't make any of those answers very controversial or debate on it, because it's just going to be I mean, it could be the right thing, and it is that's how it should be. So it can be contested. But my suggestion, if you are planning to just pass the exam, then just look at the answers and try to, I mean, I shouldn't be saying that, but just remember the answers, or at least get used to what is considered correct answers, because the questions are going to be somewhat similar, or going to come from the same pool. Okay. That's why I've given you so many questions that covers literally everything under the sun. For whatever we have covered or not covered, it's all going to be the number of questions that you're going to attempt will cover everything. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a good way for us to test ourselves
Yeah,
in terms of what we've learned, and then determine what we still need to learn and so forth. So, yeah.
But that should be the idea. But I want you to pass the exam.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's
just pass it.
yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. Because I know I've gone through this route many times. It's just that you see, once you're done with, nobody's going to ask what question was correct or incorrect.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm going to send you these Q&As perhaps in next few hours.
Okay.
If not, then it's going to be available to you for this weekend. Saturday morning, you should have it, the worst scenario. But I'm trying to figure out the password. I lost the password. I don't know where it's at. I'm going to have to make few calls to find out. Should have done it earlier when the systems guy was around, but I'll figure it out. Okay. So it'll be there for you to practice on, and I wish you good luck really with the exam, and thank you very much for your patience. And earlier when I started with this program, the only one who was there was Marge. So I need to thank her especially for being available like every single day, not making me talk to the computer. And so that was something that I really appreciate, and thank her especially for this. And for you, Andrew, I'm glad that you took rest of the classes, and I hope it is going to be useful. Besides and beyond just finishing up the course, I'd like to maintain relationship with all my students, especially professionally, if they have any questions, something that they want to talk about. There is the trainer program, which I'm planning to start soon, except that I'll just let you know, I'm just planning to convert the book or my notes in a more localized language in Turkey, because that's a huge market. A lot of expats there, they don't have much to do, and some of them who'd been my student, they wanted me to, take this step, and they're supporting me on this. So make it more localized and introduce it in Turkey, to actually put the program together for training the trainers. What this program will do is prepare others, especially my students who, have learned about enough that they are ready to teach, or to, because that is the objective, is just to, for others to recognize the importance of this, or importance of learning this skill set, which you all know, that's why you're here. It's got a lot of value. So for that to be taught, because I alone cannot teach. Some of the people who've been teaching here, I haven't been getting like a really nice reviews as I'd wanted. So they're falling a little bit short, and I think they also need a little bit of training. So I'm in the middle of organizing it, and it is going to be ready somewhat. I want to get it done by mid of February, or if not mid of February, by the end of February, it should totally be ready for me to start delivering those lectures. In fact, it's going to be more of notes, something that will have objective of learning, all the standard protocols for training the teachers. So there is a special guideline for it. So I'm going to try to make it available in a more organized way, to make it more of a formal training. And once you get trained with it, you would be able to teach it on your own as a course. Certification or not doesn't matter, as long as you're able to teach something that's of benefit whoever wants it customized, let's say. So they can teach also on their own, and we would more be participating as regulators, as an association, foreseeing the examinations, and not get directly involved in the tuitioning or teaching online. So that sort of makes us, we don't want to be in conflict with teaching versus regulating or organizing things. So if we combine it all together, then it sort of is not as much of an advantage, or it's not considered from the Canadian perspective as an association that can be given a charter. So so there are more stricter rules in Canada for it to act as a chartered organization, where the government agencies would also be able to participate, and so on. So because of that, and for the reason that we want 2022 to be something that would allow us to expand in a different direction and give out some of the responsibilities to others, that's the objective of it. So Thanks. Thank you for your time. I've taken so much of your time already.
Yeah. No,
So,
thank you for all of your instruction. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, stay in
yeah,
touch,
something
and anything to do with exams or whatever reason, you have my email. March, you and Andrew both stay in touch if you need anything.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I'll be in touch after like 5 or 6 days, as soon as I finish up my traveling and settle down.
All right.
Thank you.
All
Take
right,
care.
sounds
Have a
good.
nice
Thank you
weekend,
very much. Have a good evening.
and good luck to you, both of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.